What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Art Hack. I am your host, the Art Hack. Today we're going to be focusing on a sculpture of Jesus that is going to be based largely on the Shroud of Turin, and eventually I'm going to take this out of
What's up,
the
everybody?
digital
Welcome.
realm to the Art Hack. I am your host. You have to forgive me. I haven't done a live in a long time, and I've got a little dog down here who is trying to interrupt the stream. Let's try this again. All right, everyone. Thanks for joining if you're here. My name is Ricky. I am the Art Hack, and today we're going to be going over a live demonstration in ZBrush depicting the crucified Christ. And we're going to be using some references from the Shroud of Turin and some other art pieces to kind of piece this together. It's a very interesting piece. I'm fascinated with the story of the Shroud of Turin, and of course with the story of Jesus and everything that goes along with it. I promise I won't get too preachy today, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hop into sculpting here in a minute after we go over some groundwork to kind of talk about what we're looking at, and I'll discuss how I got to where I am. Let me go ahead and share my screen here, and here's where we're at. I used a combination of things. I had a bust that I was originally using. It was just something like this, and I'd sculpted on it a little bit ago. It's been several months since I've actually touched it, and I decided to go ahead and expound on this. I kind of want to turn it into both a full figure, and I may also turn it into a bust. But I use some resources. I have these modular anatomy tools that have been super helpful for me whenever I'm going through and doing sculptures. The ZBrush comes with some sculpting or some anatomy tools as it is, so you don't have to go out and buy these. The reason I like these though is because they're broken down into segments, and I've actually gone through and edited further the original that I received whenever I bought this on, I believe it was ArtStation years ago. I have a male and a female version, and they've been super helpful um, for me. And I encourage anyone who is interested in simply trying to tell a visual story. Yes, it's important to understand anatomy and all those little things, but if you're just simply trying to get a story out there, use whatever tools that you need to make that happen. Okay. Um, so before we get too much further, I wanted to kind of go over the groundwork of like what we're looking at, what I'm referencing as I go along. So I'm gonna switch the screen over here real quick. And let me also grab this just to make sure. Okay, so I promise I'll get this down to an art at some point. Broadcasting is so weird to me. All right, so some interesting things about the Shroud of Turin, and which is where I'm pulling most of this from. It's a fascinating piece of history. Let's see. So I pulled up some facts here. The Shroud of Turin is a length of linen cloth bearing the image of a man who appears to have suffered physical trauma in a manner consistent with crucifixion. It is believed by some to be the burial shroud of Jesus of Nazareth. Um, and you can see here an artist has gone through and he's made a realistic sculpture. I believe this is silicone. I might be wrong, but what's fascinating is that he's gone through and looked at every little pockmark and everything that was suffered uh, during this. You know, the thing with a lot of art depicting Christ is that it's really tame and it doesn't really get across what really happened to him during his time here. Uh, and people can say whatever they want to. I mean, you sit there and you take these kinds of hits, um, and I mean, when you go to church, they talk about like, hey, he was he was hit with these whips and things like that, but you don't really get like an honest feel for what actually happened. And that's the fascinating thing about art and somebody actually going through and trying to look at these things. It really gives a different flavor of what was really going down, right? And so uh, this man took a beating, like a serious, serious freaking beating, and then had to walk up a hill carrying a freaking cross that dislocated one of his arms, only to then be laid on top of it and nailed to it uh, before his life expired, right? And the fascinating thing about the shroud is that where are we at? Where is it? So this image here, right? I'm at shroud.com. There have been several studies of the shroud. I believe 1978 was the first one, uh, and they went out and they took photographs of the shroud. Well, actually, the first photograph was done long before that. It was done on a plate. So what they noticed is that the image that's on the shroud is actually a photo negative. Okay, and they still cannot figure out to this day how this thing was made. They have no idea how this image was generated. You know, some people have tried to say, hey, it's paint, but it's not possible. It's simply not possible. Now there has been carbon dating that has been done, and they tried to discredit whether or not it could be dated back to the time of Christ, but that since has been refuted by a whole host of other scientists. And I'm not going to go argue with people about that, but there has been it's a very contentious thing. Now the image uh, is not painted or dyed. Its formation process still remains unknown. There are people who sit here and study this and who have come around and said that the only way that this sort of image could have been uh, made would have been through some sort of blast of light that's more powerful than anything that anyone can even imagine. And I know I'm uh, speaking super scientific terminology here, but the interesting thing is that it only impressed an image on like the top layers of the fabric that's there. It's absolutely fascinating. And inside of this, they found this image, and it's almost they've done further studies that depict basically an X-ray, and so you can see the bones, you can see every single mark that was on this person, and there's motion. I think they say it's like there was some sort of strobing effect or something like that, but you can see that the position of the body changes. And so there's a whole series of documentaries out there that I would encourage anyone to go through and check out. It's absolutely fascinating. But the reason that I bring it up is because much of the art throughout the centuries interestingly has shown to be very similar to the shroud. So people were looking at this image for centuries and drawing and painting and referencing. So if people 500 years ago were looking at this going, hey, uh, this is this is Jesus, um, you know, I don't know. For me, that's a that's really hard for me to walk away from and go, nah, that's not true. And they've traced the history of it back. Let's see. Well, the shroud is currently housed in the Cathedral of St. John the Baptist in Turin, Italy, and has been there since 1578. Prior to that, it had a storied history. There was a fire, which is why there's burn marks in the corner because it was in a box, and the metal box, the corners melted and singed through the fabric and everything. So what's interesting is that it's influenced all kinds of art, Byzantine art. There are specific things like the beard and the hair and the blood marks and the nose and the eyes that are consistent across multiple images across multiple centuries. And so I'm gonna wrap this portion of this up here in a moment, but it's simply fascinating. So without further ado, we're gonna have a look at some of these images, and we're going to try and tidy up what we've got going on here. I like hopping onto Google and using it as a reference point, and because other people have obviously gone down this road before, right? So let's see. So there's one image. I already have a couple of other ones over here. So I'm going to be pulling from some of this stuff just to kind of plug things in. I'm not going to go line for line, dot by dot, or any of that. I'm not trying to do all that. But there are obviously several other resources out there. Somebody's gone through and done this sculpture. I wish I knew who it was so I can give them credit. But this is what we're going to be aiming for. Man, can you imagine? Like all these holes in his head right here. They're depicted on that shroud. So let's see. Let's grab a couple of others. Let's see. Now you can go through and you can plug all this stuff into ZBrush for me. And some people make all these fancy boards and everything whenever they go into Sculpt, but I'm not going to go do that. It's easier for me to just pull up a few images and try to bounce back and forth. I'm paying attention to the shape of the face, where these creases are, this fold, this nasolabial fold here, the ridge of the eyebrow, the shape of the nose. And you might not be able to see where my mouse is, but we're going to hop into the sculpting program here in just one moment. All right. Okay, so we're over in ZBrush. Got my reference up on my other screen. And we're going to start trying to dial in some of these things. The pose right now, aside from the legs, is a little bit symmetrical. We're going to break that up here in a little bit because I don't recall which arm it was. I think it's his right arm was dislocated. So you see a lot of these depictions of Christ where he's like, you know, a part of his body's hanging down further than the other, uh, and the reason for that was a dislocation of his arm from at the shoulder. So we'll do that. We will build out this cross a bit, and then we'll work on getting all that connected. Right now, I have it sitting further away. We're going to make sure that it rests correctly. Now, they say that he was actually naked whenever he was crucified, but we're going to cover him up. Feel like that's right to do. Okay, so I think the most important part is the face, and proportionally, I think it's pretty okay. Just looking around real quick before I get tracking on this. All right. Okay, so we're going to focus on the face. Now, there is a temptation to try and sculpt everything back here, but honestly, most of it's not going to be seen. So we want to focus on the parts that we are going to see. No point in wasting time. So let me pull up my reference over here. We're just going to start dialing in some of this information. So we got this fold here. I'm just going to start plugging away a little bit. Crank down my intensity so I don't destroy this. I'm going to adjust my lazy step to 0.006. The reason why is it just makes things look nicer. And then we'll increase our lazy radius. And I'm curious to see how this is going to turn out. I haven't decided how tall I want the figure to be, but I would imagine a good I can get a pretty decent size off of that Saturn 4. So we'll see. So far, I've only sculpted, or I've only printed a handful of things on there. I printed a little Totoro for my stepson, and then just a little test piece. Now, I was pretty impressed with the printer. It was really simple to use. I'm not new to 3D printing, but most of my experience with printing has been with FDM printers. Started out with the original Creality CR10, and I've been wanting to get into resin printing for a moment, but I've been hesitant to jump into it because the landscape changes so rapidly, and I feel like now things are at a spot where it's a good time to jump in. And honestly, it's probably a good time to jump in quite some time ago, but for me, it comes down to ease of use. I don't want to be spending a ton of time trying to figure all the little tidbits out about it. I just want something that works, and that's coming from. I have no problem with jumping into programs and trying to tweak settings, things like that. It's just I would rather spend my time making the thing that I originally intended than dealing with technical hurdles. But it is part of the process, so it is what it is, you know. If you like the content here, thanks for hanging out. Feel free to leave a comment, like, share, subscribe, all those cool things. If you have any questions, of course, I'll be more than happy to answer them. So I think right here, doing okay. I'm going to get this to a point where I'm good with it, and then I'm going to go focus on another area. And that's usually helpful for me. Just to try not to get stuck in one spot. And the trick with some of this is just doing it. Now I'm going to break up some of the symmetry here, especially with these marks here. I'll be curious to see what level of detail comes out on that printer. Need to give him some eyebrows at some point. We're not going to focus on that at the moment. I'm also going to have to fill that in. Right now I'll need to it's important to work with different subdivision levels so that you can bounce between them. It's easier to simplify shapes at lower subdivision levels. To keep in mind that there's supposed to be an eyeball in here. So I'm going to make sure that that is depicted. But I also need to go the opposite way, or not the opposite way, but I need to bring out this bottom piece too, right? And I know that there are simpler ways to do this. This is just how I'm running with it. And that's the thing, is that you, when you're sculpting, work with what works for you. Um, it's all about the process in the first place. Now, obviously, if you're working for a client, you need to be as quick as you can be. You don't always have tons of time to burn. You gotta remember, time is money if you're working, if you're doing this for work. But if you're just doing it for fun, then take your time. Don't get in a hurry about any of this stuff. Serious. Just lightly hitting it with a smooth. Okay. The reason I use smooth topological is that it tries to recognize changes in topology, and it really helps, especially if you have polygroups. Um, it helps me keep from having to mask things that otherwise I really shouldn't. If I was working with just a regular move brush, I would have to go through mask and then move, mask and move. And sometimes that's necessary, but the fewer steps to get where you need to go, the better. All right. So we're going to switch away from working on that portion of the face for a moment, and we're going to work on this beard. Let's have a look at the topology. So definitely need to dynamesh this. Before I do that, let's make sure we save. ZBrush does do an automatic save if you have it turned on. By default, it automatically saves, but you never want to rely on that, because I've had so many times many of the times whenever ZBrush has crashed on me, it's crashed while it's trying to save. So that's no bueno. So let me start trying to pull some of this out, and I need to pull this beard up. It's gonna look kind of ugly here for a minute. We're gonna get it worked out here. So this needs to come up, and I'm referencing one of the images that I talked about earlier. You don't need to worry about the shape of the topology or any of that stuff. Get it to where it needs to be. Then I'm going to go Dynamesh. I don't think that 500 is necessary. Let's try 200 Dynamesh. Would you like to freeze subdivisions? No. Okay. What I try to tell people all the time is work from low subdivisions to high. Get things dialed in, get the shape of it all dialed in at your lowest setting. Now, what I'm trying to think about right now is the print and where things are going to rest. You got these undercuts that are going to be there, and do they need to? Not really, and especially if I'm going to go and let's say I go through and try to mold this later. If I want to do reproductions, I do have to be mindful about how far these undercuts go, or at least try and consider how am I going to reproduce this thing. So this will be a point where I can use what's here to try and help us out. We're going to come back and sculpt on this a little bit. Right now I just want to get the general shape. I'm sure that this will print just fine, and it'll probably even cure just fine with those kinds of undercuts. It's a great thing about 3D printing, but um, unless you're running a giant print farm, let's say I decided to put these up on Etsy or something like that, and then I suddenly get a bulk order for like 1,000 of them, right? Um, Printing them all is not probably going to be the best way to go, right? We'll be talking about all of that once we get to that portion. I'm going to be doing a review of that Saturn here pretty soon. All right. Just going to pull that down into that chest area. Same here. All right. So we got that dialed in. I think I've got the pose. Well, I think I have the shape of the body mostly roughly blocked in where I want it to be. The hands, I want to pose those. I'm not going to use T-pose mesh. Not today. We're just going to use transpose lines to be able to move things around. Okay. So I've got this going on with the hair. I'm going to delete higher. And there's another piece I want to add in here. We need to, they say that they gave him a crown of thorns. And the type of plant that it was out there had these really long spikes. So I don't, they, some people say it wasn't just like this little halo that you see depicted in all these images, but it was more like almost like a helmet of sorts. Like they really went to town on it. But unless you were there, I guess you wouldn't really know, would you? So let's see, append. We're gonna append a sphere 3D, and we're gonna use this to build our crown of thorns. I'm going to use I'm going to use a combination of curved tubes and we'll build a thorn, a single thorn, and then we will plug that into the rest of the sculpture. So I'm going to make this a little bit larger than his head. We'll turn on transparency. And we will kind of shape it just a little bit. Shape it to fit just a little, just like that. Okay. And all right. I'm going to go ahead and save again. So we're going to use brush curve tubes, curve tube snap. All right. ZBrush decided it wanted to save there for a moment. So let's test out our curve first. Okay. So I want to play around with the settings. I'm going to take the stroke menu and put it over here into this tray. I'm going to turn on lazy mouse. I'm going to increase our step to curve step. That's what we're looking for. So I need it to be like not so bendy. Because it is like a part of a bush, right? And so I need it to be a little bit jagged in some places. And so by changing the curve step, that will really help. So let's see, 5 steps. And then how many sub steps? We'll do okay. And then and if things get in the way, just go solo. Super simple. Like that. I do want to check the size. Let's see, curve functions. Modifier, intensity. I think this is mostly where I want it to be. Let's turn off solo. And we're just going to wrap this thing around. Like if they found a random plant, right? That didn't work out too well. And if you do stuff like this and it's not like sitting directly on the surface where you want to, that's okay. Another way to do it would be to you can use masking to paint your where your curve's gonna go. But let's see, intensity. Size. Size. Alright. So I don't want to do intensity. I do want to focus on size. And that will help us out a lot. Okay. Okay. So when you're doing size, if you're affecting the size, you want to control this fall off. So I want it to be pretty consistent across the board, so I'll just put it like that. Okay. And then we can go through later and affect that accordingly. So we'll do our curve step to 2. And then we'll drop our size down just a little bit. Come on. At work, I use a Cintiq, and I'm using my Intuos at the house, so I get spoiled whenever I'm at work. It is okay. So yeah, so we're just gonna make this little basket on his. Oh, come on. And if this doesn't work out, it's okay. I mean, there are plenty of other things I could do. Like I can almost take a torus. In fact, that might be easier to do. In fact, let's do that. Curve functions, delete. Okay. So we're gonna go in a different direction for the sake of sanity, right? So, and that happens. Like sometimes I'll get so far into a thing, trying something, and it's like, okay, I've spent too much time on this. Let's try a different angle. So we're gonna go grab a ring, and we're gonna initialize it. And we're just gonna take this thing and we're gonna duplicate it a whole bunch of times. But before I do that, I want to initialize it. I want to adjust the radius, something like that. And then we're just going to take this as it is. See, we don't need all of this density. There's no reason for it. Oh, come on. I think 12 is sufficient. Could probably even get away with less. Let's do 8. The higher that you get in geometry, the more difficult it becomes to manage. So I think 8 is a good spot to be on it. And we will make it a polymesh 3D, and then we're going to add it to our project here. So I'm going to add this ring, and I don't want to just start editing. I'm going to duplicate this and then just work on the duplicate. That way, if I mess something up, I have something to fall back on. I don't have to go redo all that work. So we're going to save this. And we're going to make sure that symmetry is on for now. All right. Come on. And in fact, at this point, we don't really need that little helmet that we made, because we can just use this. Turn on transparency as well. And we'll just start shaping it with the gizmo first, and then we'll go through and we'll refine it. So I don't want anything to be. Ooh, this is where I need to get away from symmetry. I'm gonna put that there. And we're going to control, click and drag, and that's going to give us something different. And then we can affect this shape too. And I'm going to keep doing this until I like the general status of things. I'm just going to keep repeating this process until I have something in place. Think of it like barbed wire or something, you know. Because they say that they just grabbed some plant, just started yanking it around and fashioned this thing. They don't all need to be facing the same direction. Should be crisscrossing. Oops. So I want to go to the top. Place that down. Okay. Think a few more and should be golden. And then we'll go through and start refining each one of these individually. Okay. All right. So now we have this mess. The easiest way to deal with it is to go down to polygroups, do auto groups, and then now use move topological, and we'll just start pulling some of this stuff around. And to be honest, I think I want to see. I'm going to run it through the Z-remesher, see what happens. Let's go geometry, Z-remesher. I want to keep our groups. I'm going to try to go half of what we currently have. It didn't do that at all. Uh, Basically doubled it or more. So we're going to keep groups. We're not going to smooth our groups. Interesting. Why is it doing that? Sorry. So we're going to go. There we go. Better. Now I am using ZBrush 2022. I'm just have not upgraded since Maxon bought out Pixelogic. Nothing against Maxon. Um, I used to keep up with all the changes that happen every single year, and I'll scrub through whatever the new things come across. But honestly, right now I have my workflow, and it works for me now, and so could be my famous last words, but if it's not broke, there's no reason in trying to fix it. And yeah, I did buy Nomad not too long ago. That's an interesting experience. Um, it is pretty cool to be able to just grab a tablet and start sculpting wherever you're at. In fact, I did a little sculpture for a client around Halloween last year. They wanted like there's a meme of this goofy looking pumpkin, cringe pumpkin, and so they wanted to see if somebody could make that. So I told them I would do it. I just wanted to do it, see, just for the fun of it. It's pretty cool. That's the thing I love about this stuff is that it opens up all kinds of possibilities. 3D printing is not for everybody. Um, Especially resin. I know that there's a lot of people that do minis and things like that, but it is an investment, and you have to really weigh all that. Like, it's not just you're buying a printer, you're buying a whole setup. Like, you can't just, with resin, like with FDM printing, you can get away with basically just the FDM print, the printer, and just some basic tools to get it off the build plate and all that. But with these resin printers, it's much more in depth, as many of you probably already know. So I would heavily advise anyone who is considering getting into 3D printing. Um, if it's something that you're just curious about and you want to try it out, I would recommend the sources that have been helpful for me, like Faux Hammer and a few others. I'll link their channel descriptions. But don't just go out and grab all this stuff and then find yourself in a situation where, okay, well, what do I do with all this? Um, it is exciting. Resin printing can be dangerous. So you need to keep all those factors in mind as you're planning things out, especially if you got families, pets, and everything in between. Right. Just trying to get these pieces dialed in. We'll go through and start putting some spikes on it. We're going to take an intermission here in about 30 minutes. And I will be back this afternoon to continue working on this. I want to get all this kind of, it needs to be touching the surface because it needs to get all welded in together. Dog's over there rolling around in something, I don't know what. So if you hear any jingling or anything like that, that's my little menace. Bring this out. I think we're going to add a couple more rings just to kind of fill out the top here. The geometry gets too stretched, that's okay. You can fix that with an inflate brush. Okay, so there's that. This needs to be edited. Now we'll have to try and fill in any gaps that might pop up. Like, especially if I was going to go do a casting of this. Like, I couldn't have all these. I mean, I suppose you could, but you would have to add them after the fact, right? So if you're going to do a casting, you're not going to want to have like all these holes and everything. It really needs to be filled in. So, like, jumping into this, and you're trying to make things. Like, I didn't think about that kind of stuff. It was not even on my radar. I mean, it makes sense, but till you've actually had to do it, it just wouldn't have been a concept to me. Okay. All right. Let's see. So one of the ways I can help that whole situation with the gaps would simply be to come over here to deformation, and I can just do a simple inflate like that. I'll kind of round things out and fill in some of that space. That's a better alternative than trying to sweep over it and nail every single piece. But you know, you want to do that, by all means, go for it. So I think that, because I'm trying to imagine, I'm gonna have some spikes really coming over here. I don't even know if I want the hair to be showing through the top. See how this looks smoothed. Okay. We'll do a little bit of sculpting on it. I'm not gonna lie, Pomeranians are not my favorite type of dog. But my wife insisted on it. No, we must all pay. Right. Now the type of plant that they believe was used was called Some say it was called the Euphorbia. And I'm trying to find a good picture. Let me switch over. So this is Euphorbia. I mean, look at this thing. That's pretty thick. Like much thicker than what I've got going on here. That's nasty. Mm. But that's what they say. Let's see. Euphorbia milli. Dude, that is gnarly. Can you imagine? Mm. So, we're gonna make some spikes. And then we're going to start plugging them in here. Or I might actually, yeah, we're going to make a spike. So switch back over to ZBrush. Save this real quick. So the way we're going to do this is we're just going to grab a cylinder and we're going to initialize it. No inner radius. I think that'll be good for that, and we'll just keep it simple at 12, even 8 will probably be fine. And then we can taper the top. And then I'm just going to go ahead and make it a polymesh 3D. Make polymesh 3D. That was weird. Okay. And then we're still going to shape it out a little bit. So take this. I think that'll be fine. If we do a subdivide. It's important to go through and do this stuff here. Oh, come on. And all I'm doing is I'm going to crease this. Okay. So we've gone through, made this little spike. Let me go ahead and save. Okay. I have my tool. Now I'm going to come over to my project. We're going to start plugging this in. We're going to subtool, just like we did with the crown. We're going to append and duplicate. That's not what I want to do. Make sure you're on the right tool first of all. All right. Okay. I'm going to duplicate this tool. I'm going to turn that one off. And this just helps it to be a little bit non-destructive. Right. Move this into place. And just like with everything else, I'm just going to move, rotate. And I'm just going to repeat this process until it's roughly where I want it to be. Changing up the size be helpful. And we're going to go back later and dial in the shape. Come on. And obviously, it's going to be a pretty tedious process. So I won't be hurt if somebody comes along and is like, "Nah, I'm not watching all this." All right. I think we're at a stopping point for now. We'll come back this afternoon. We will work on plugging in some hair strands. I want to get those things done while I'm in that area. And then we'll start working on refining everything. So hair, refinement, work on this beard too. Then we'll see how far we get today. Thanks for hanging out. Back later.